Hey everyone, this is Nick and welcome back to your Linux and open source news show. So this week we have Fedora planning to go all in on AI. Fortunately, it looks to be ethical AI, but it's AI nonetheless. We have Proton buying standard notes to maybe add a Proton Notes tool to their whole suite of services. And we also have the last remaining pieces falling in place to fix Nvidia on Wayland, with the Explicit sync protocol landing in Wayland, but also in X-Wayland, so you can say goodbye to frame pacing problems and flickering issues. And of course, we also have the usual segue to our sponsor. This video is sponsored by Squarespace, and chances are you all know what Squarespace is, but if you don't, just know that they're your all-in-one solution to create and run your own website. Squarespace has all the tools you need to start your website, improve it, even without knowing anything about code. They have pre-made layouts that you can customize heavily in terms of the colors, of block placement, just by drag and drop. It's really easy to use. You can create all your pages, but you also have plenty of modules, like anything you need to run a store, complete with online payment. You have a members-only area. You have a logo creator. You can even buy your own domain name that you will need to have a serious website straight from Squarespace. So they're your all-in-one platform to let you create and run that website. So to get started with Squarespace, just click the link in the description or head over to squarespace.com/thelinuxexperiment and you'll get 10% off your first website. Okay, so Matthew Miller, the lead for the Fedora project, wrote a blog post about the strategy for Fedora, soberly named Fedora Strategy 2028. The first thing will be to reorganize the various work groups into a more legible structure, so new people know better where they should go to help and contribute. But the biggest info here is that Fedora is apparently going all in on AI. Matthew says that AI will just be an accelerator and a tool, and that it won't really replace people. Developers won't turn into prompt engineers, and artists will still be able to create. And he also says that Linux needs to get in on AI if we don't want to be left behind. And I do agree that once people get ChatGPT shoved into their faces by Microsoft at every turn, and once Apple delivers something similar for macOS, people moving to Linux will expect the same kind of feature, but it doesn't mean we should hurry up too much. Matthew has a few examples of AI that could be useful, like speech synthesis, that has always been pretty bad on Linux, but could now be ultra-realistic and actually useful, or even for translating open source projects in more languages. He also says that right now, all of this AI work is mostly proprietary, it's trained on hidden data, it's running on hardware that doesn't really have open source drivers by companies that generally don't care about open source. And personally, as someone very skeptical about AI and the balance between the good it can bring versus the harm it will absolutely cause, I was pretty dismayed by this blog post until I reached the point where Matthew pointed out that they need to work with the rest of the open source world to define which AI tools align with their values, with policies to allow or deny certain tools depending, I guess, on how they're trained, on how open the model is, and other things like that. Matthew also says they could deploy models in the OS itself, like a local assistant that doesn't send anything to any server or sell your personal data. And sure, if Fedora and the open source world can land on an ethical AI model or tool that they can use, then why not? But they need to make sure that first, it's not privacy invasive or controlled by a big tech company, and second, they need to make sure it's trained on ethically sourced data. Just because something was published publicly on the internet doesn't mean it's free to use for anyone. There are licenses attached to the code, to images. I could just grab an image from Getty Image, it's been publicly published, but that doesn't mean I have the right to use it for any purpose I want. Same goes for data used to train AI models. Public doesn't mean free to use for every use case. Now, Ubuntu 24.04 LTS got its beta release, delayed 1 week because of the recent problem with the XZ library. 24.04 will be a long-term support release, and you can expect a few improvements. First, it comes with GNOME 46, with its experimental variable refresh rate support, with improved Wayland support, a much better file manager, collapsible and expandable notifications, reorganized settings, and the ability to log into a GNOME session through RDP. On top of that, Ubuntu's installer got a bit of a redesign on most of its screens, and it looks a lot better than its first iteration. And it also now supports automated deployments through YAML config files. The default app selection changed just a little bit as well, with Cheese being replaced by the much more modern Snapshot camera app, GNOME games being ditched from the install entirely, and Thunderbird moving to a snap instead of a deb. But this snap is being officially supported by the Thunderbird team. You will also get the kernel 6.8, as well as some power efficiency improvements thanks to the new P-State drivers that should deliver better battery life, mostly for AMD, but also for Intel CPUs. You will also get a better gaming experience thanks to the virtual memory mapping limit being increased to the same amount as Fedora and as Arch as well. And obviously you can expect a dedicated video to review Ubuntu 24.04 once it's out, and also all of its flavors, although this time around it seems like there's not going to be much changes, because even Kubuntu is not moving to Plasma 6. Now this week we have a nice blog post from Xavier Hugel, a KDE team member, who explains what Explicit Sync is and why it is great that it's coming to the Wayland protocols. The gist of it is that Explicit Sync is a method that lets the application tell the drivers, the kernel, and the compositor when this application has finished rendering its next frame and when to synchronize that frame to the display, meaning that performance is better because the drivers don't have to do as much work to see if something is ready and then to display it. With Explicit Sync landing in the Wayland protocols, it means Nvidia users are finally going to get as good an experience as users of any other GPU, because Nvidia drivers, at least the proprietary ones, do not support implicit sync, the method used previously. And this led to some Wayland and ex-Wayland related glitches, frame pacing issues, and various flickering problems. All of that will be gone once the proprietary drivers are updated and once ex-Wayland also supports it, which is going to be the case very soon because that code is merged already. It's been submitted by Nvidia, and the code apparently takes inspiration from the corresponding Wayland protocol, so it's easier to support. It's 11 patches that have been worked on since August 2022, so seeing it finally merged is pretty nice. Nvidia should soon have an updated proprietary driver to take advantage of that as well, but the Mesa drivers can already handle the new protocol, GNOME's compositor Mutter already supports it as well, and as far as I know, Kwin will support that too in Plasma 6.1, planned for June. So we are not far off from finally getting rid of those frame pacing problems and flickering on Nvidia when using Wayland, which is really cool. Now personally, I never experienced these frame pacing or flickering issues on Nvidia on Wayland, but a lot of people seem to have that problem, which prevents them either from gaming or from moving to Wayland. So it's nice to see that finally fixed. Hopefully in a few months will be good, and if there are still issues, by that point we should have NVK and Nouveau fully ready and probably up to the task for most people. Now Proton, makers of Proton Mail and Proton VPN, acquired Standard Notes, an open source note-taking application that is end-to-end encrypted, presumably to bring Notes to life as its own product in the Proton suite of tools. Standard Notes will remain open source, of course, and it will still undergo independent audits, and their pricing also will not change. Standard Notes actually confirmed this, as they said they would still operate as their own independent product. And they also said that they would benefit from Proton's resources to make the app better in the long run. The goal for Proton seems more to be integrating Standard Notes into the Proton suite of tools, probably by letting you use your Proton account to sync notes between devices, maybe at some point getting a web-based interface to access your notes. Things like that seem logical and pretty likely. And it seems like a good match, because both Proton and Standard Notes have grown organically. They do not take in venture capital money, meaning that they're only beholden to their users and not to investors. And also, Notes is something Proton users have been requesting for a long time. If the integration of simple login inside of Proton is anything to go by, I think Standard Notes users have nothing to fear, and Proton users can just rejoice. They're getting a Notes product for free, I guess. And now we're gonna talk desktop environments. Let's start with KDE, because there are some nice updates coming to Plasma 6.1. The first one is a streamlined way of setting key bindings and keyboard shortcuts, meaning you will now be able to set the super key to do whatever you want, like opening the overview or KRunner or anything else. Currently, you can only do that through the command line, and apparently it was not such an easy thing to implement, but at least now it's done and you'll be able to use your super key to open whatever you want, just like in any other desktop. In 6.1, you will also be able to sync your RGB lighting with your plasma accent color, which is cool if you like RGB, I guess. And Discover will let you update snap packages manually instead of automatically. And that's all good stuff. I still don't have Plasma 6 on Tuxedo OS for now, but I did get to use it more on Nobara, which is the distro I decided to install on my Linux gaming console because Holo ISO, the upgrade to the immutable version, just did not go well. And in GNOME land, we have the team working on using Nautilus as a provider for the file chooser portal, meaning that you would get all the nice improvements of recent Nautilus versions when you're trying to open a file, instead of using the GTK file picker. Printing support is also coming to WebKit GTK, meaning Flatpak Epiphany could now print using the printing portal, and there's more work on implementing encryption of the home directory through systemd homed. There's also more work on GNOME's online accounts to better support WebDAV and to better support Microsoft 365. And we even have some mockups for an OS installer that could be used by any distro that decides to ship GNOME. Same goes for global shortcut support in GNOME. There are now mockups to describe how you would register these shortcuts, something pretty crucial for handling certain apps under Wayland, for example OBS, especially since the global shortcuts portal is now implemented and should land in GNOME 47. That's also pretty good stuff. Like I said in my GNOME 46 review, the major things being funded by the Sovereign Tech Fund, that giant 1 million grants that GNOME got, all of those things are landing in GNOME 47 and GNOME 48. So these are going to be pretty major releases with good improvements for everyone. Now let's move on to gaming. First, we're losing access to League of Legends soon, which personally I don't care about. I find this kind of game absolutely boring and the community is so toxic I'm not even getting close to it, but a lot of people might be very unhappy with that. Riot Games is implementing their Vanguard anti-cheat tool soon, which doesn't support Linux. They addressed that exact issue in an FAQ, saying that they never officially supported Linux and that the current use of Wine to run the game just will not work anymore. They said that Linux doesn't give them enough ways to affect boot state or kernel modules, which sounds like a very positive thing to me because no game or app should have the ability to read or write or affect in any way your boot state, your boot process, or your kernel modules. Now, Riot also said that there are too many differences between distros for them to even try to implement a solution. As per building a workaround for Proton or Wine, they said it would amount to leaving a backdoor open specifically for Linux, and that one would be sure to be exploited by cheaters on other platforms. They also said that they seem to only have about 800 daily players on Linux, and that's just not worth supporting. The core of the problem remains. Kernel-level anti-cheat tools should just not exist. They are not a good way of building anti-cheat solutions. They might be more effective than others, but they're so invasive. No operating system should let any application, whether it's a game or an app or a professional tool, implement something like this that messes with the kernel or can read such low-level information. If it means that on Linux we can play games, it sucks, but I would much rather we never implement anything close to that than having access to those games. And, well, we also have some pretty weird news for emulation, as Discord removed the servers created by new Nintendo Switch emulators, like Suyu and Sudashi. Not only are the associated Discord servers gone, but the accounts for the lead developers have also been completely disabled, apparently. All Discord said is that they answered a court injunction, but it seems quite strange because nowhere does it say in Discord's policies that this complete deletion is something that could happen without any warning, and since Yuzu settled out of court with Nintendo, a court injunction seems very unlikely because this never went to court. Of course, as a closed platform, Discord has every right to terminate any account or server they want, but this feels a bit strange. And I guess this is a good example of why when you're building something in a legal gray area, you should always self-host all your community, all your repos, all your code, because at least you can't be taken down by the tool that you currently use. Doesn't mean that a company won't try to sue you, but at least you do have a fighting chance to try and defend your product instead of just being wiped off the internet without any recourse. Okay, and now it's time to tell you about this video sponsor, Tuxedo Computers. They make laptops, desktops, and NUCs that ship with Linux pre-installed. You can pick from a selection of popular distros, or you can install your own distro, because Tuxedo contribute patches upstream to most projects when they encounter problems when testing new hardware, and if those patches haven't been accepted yet, they have repos you can add to actually get all those fixes, meaning that a Tuxedo computer will just run perfectly under Linux. They have a big range of devices, from small ultrabooks for office work all the way up to giant workstations, gaming towers, gaming laptops. You decide what you want. All the devices are very customizable, especially the laptops. You can have your own custom keyboard layout, you can have your own logo on the lid, you can pick the components, you can open, repair, and upgrade all the devices. And Tuxedo Computers is basically all I use these days. My channel runs on one of their laptops, and my gaming PC is from Tuxedo as well. So if you need a new computer, you want to run Linux on it, and you also want to support a company that actually supports Linux, then you can click the link in the description below and get yourself a PC from Tuxedo. They're really good. Okay, so thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you know what to do. There's that like button, there's the subscribe button, the notification bell, the comment section, and if you really enjoy the channel, there are plenty of links in the description of the video. Becoming a Patreon member or YouTube member at any tier will get you a daily version of this show from Monday to Friday, among a lot of other exclusive content and advantages. So thanks for watching, and I guess you'll see me in the next one. Bye!